The morning sun had barely brushed the red ridges of the Wyoming hills when Ethan Brooks opened his front door, expecting silence and the smell of rain-soaked sagebrush. What he found instead stopped him cold. A woman lay asleep on his porch, curled up against a post with two small children nestled beside her. One boy's head rested against her arm, his tiny chest rising and falling beneath the patched blanket. The younger child, barely more than a baby, had a stuffed horse tucked under his chin. For a man who'd lived alone for nearly 7 years, it was an image both startling and painfully tender. Ethan stood there for a moment, boots still and quiet, his hand resting on the doorknob. The night must have been cold. He could see the dew in their hair. The woman's shawl was worn thin, her dress hem-caked with dirt. Whoever she was, she hadn't come far in comfort. He finally cleared his throat, low but not harsh. "Ma'am." The woman stirred instantly, eyes opening wide in panic. For a moment, she didn't seem to know where she was. Then her gaze darted to her children, still fast asleep, and she relaxed slightly, though her lips trembled. "I'm sorry," she whispered, starting to rise. "We'll go. We just needed just a place to rest a bit. My boy was sick." Ethan lifted a hand. "Don't rush. Porch is big enough for all of us this morning." He crouched down, the brim of his hat shading his steady gray eyes. "Where were you headed?" The woman hesitated. "I don't rightly know anymore," she said softly. "We were going to my sister's near Riverton, but we lost the horse last night. It just collapsed on the trail. I carried the little one as far as I could." Her voice cracked on the last words, and she looked away. Ethan studied her for a moment. There was strength in her face despite the exhaustion, the kind that didn't come from pride, but from years of enduring. He straightened, nodded toward the open door. "Coffee's hot inside. If those two snore, I'll build a room for 'em." The woman blinked in confusion. "What?" A smile ghosted across his face. "Means you're welcome. Come on." Inside the small ranch house, the smell of coffee and biscuits filled the air. Ethan poured her a cup and slid a plate across the table. The children, now awake, sat quietly, too polite or too shy to speak. The older one stared at Ethan with a kind of cautious curiosity. "What's your name, ma'am?" Ethan asked. "Clara," she said. "Clara Ames. This is Will, and that's Eli." Ethan nodded. "You can call me Ethan." Clara's fingers curled around the warm mug as if afraid it might vanish. "We'll only stay till the boy's stronger," she said quickly. "Then we'll be on our way." Ethan took a slow sip. "You'll stay till you've rested proper. Road's long and weather's turning." Outside, a cold wind swept over the hills, carrying the smell of wet earth and distance. The ranch stretched wide and lonely beyond the window's cattle grazing in the far pasture, fences leaning like tired sentinels. That afternoon, Clara helped wash dishes despite Ethan's protests. The boys followed him to the barn, wide-eyed at the horses. Eli, the younger one, pointed. "That one's big." Ethan chuckled. "That's Thunder. He's got a heart bigger than his head, and that's saying something." The older boy, Will, ran his hand along the stall door. "Do you live out here all by yourself, mostly?" Ethan said. "My hand left last month to marry a girl in town. Guess I scared off the rest." Will looked thoughtful. "Mama says we don't scare easy." Ethan smiled at that dot by sundown. The widow and her children had eaten supper by the fire, and the boys were already dozing on a blanket near the hearth. Clara watched them, her expression soft but distant. Ethan noticed. "They've been on the road long?" 3 weeks, she said quietly. "After my husband passed, there wasn't much left. The landlord said the land was his now. We packed what we could and just went." He nodded slowly, staring into the flames. "You did right bringing him out of that." Clara looked down. "Sometimes it doesn't feel like it." Ethan stirred the fire with a poker. "Sometimes doing right don't feel good at all." "Don't make it wrong." Days passed, and what was supposed to be one night stretched into a week. The children filled the ranch with laughter it hadn't known in years. Will helped Ethan mend fences, and Eli chased chickens with endless joy. Clara offered to work for her, keep laundry, cooking, whatever needed doing. Ethan let her, though he paid her in flour and sugar she refused to accept. One afternoon, as they hung sheets in the breeze, Ethan said, "You're making this place look alive again." Clara smiled faintly. "You mean less lonely?" He nodded. That too. For a long time, neither spoke. The wind tugged at the wet fabric, snapping it like sails. Finally, she said softly, "I don't want to stay where I'm not wanted." Ethan turned to her. "You're wanted here." Her eyes met his, startled, then soft. By the end of the second week, the boys called him Mr. Ethan, and Eli followed him everywhere. When the little one caught a cold one chilly night, Ethan sat by the fire carving a small wooden horse to cheer him. Clara found it on the table in the morning. "You made this?" she asked. Ethan shrugged. "Horse won't eat much." Thought he'd like that. Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. "You've done more for us than anyone in a long time," she whispered. He looked down, uncomfortable. Maybe it's time somebody did. A storm rolled in one night, fierce and relentless. Rain hammered the roof, wind howled through the cracks. Ethan got up twice to check the barn. When he came back the second time, he found Clara still awake, sitting by the window with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "You should rest," he said quietly. "I can't," she admitted. "The sound reminds me of the night everything changed. The night we lost the farm." He walked over and stood beside her, looking out at the dark. "You don't have to keep remembering it alone." Clara looked at him for a long moment. There was something in his voice, something she hadn't heard in a long time. Steadiness. "Why are you being so kind to us, Ethan?" He thought for a moment. "Because once a stranger found me on a road, gave me food when I had nothing. Said kindness was like rain, it don't ask who deserves it." She smiled faintly. "Your stranger sounds wise." "He was," Ethan said, "and mean as a mule. Still, he saved me." The storm lasted 2 days. When the skies cleared, the air smelled of pine and clean earth. Ethan saddled up Thunder and took Will out to ride the ridge. From there, they could see the river shining in the distance and the wide, empty beauty of Wyoming all around them. "You think your ma's happy here?" Ethan asked. Will looked thoughtful. "She smiles more, that's new." Ethan's chest tightened a little. "Good. She deserves that." The boy glanced at him sideways. "You like her, don't you?" Ethan almost laughed. "That obvious?" Will grinned. "Even Eli knows." When they got back to the house, Clara was sweeping the porch. The sight of her, their sunlight on her hair, the smell of fresh bread drifting through the door made something in Ethan settle deep inside him. He stopped at the bottom of the steps. "Clara," he said. She turned, smiling. "Yes?" He scratched the back of his neck. "I've been thinking, this old place has got more rooms than I need. If those boys keep snoring loud enough, I may have to build another one." Her smile faltered just a little. "Are you saying you want us to stay?" "I'm saying," Ethan replied slowly, "that it's been a long time since this porch saw laughter, and I don't much care to lose it again." For a long moment, she just looked at him. Then her eyes softened, and she nodded. "If you're sure." "I've never been sure of anything." Winter crept over the land, bringing frost to the windows and long, quiet evenings by the fire. Ethan built the extra room, true to his word, wide enough for the boys, warm enough for comfort. He worked late into the nights, and Clara often brought him coffee as he hammered the last boards into place. One night, she stood beside him as the lantern light glowed across the new doorway. "You really did build it?" she said softly. "Told you I would," he said, smiling. She touched the frame, her fingers trembling slightly. "No one's ever done something like this for us before." Ethan met her eyes. Guess they were all fools then, she laughed quietly. It was the sound he'd come to love most. By spring, wildflowers spread across the hills, and laughter filled the ranch every morning. The widow no longer looked weary. The boys ran barefoot through the grass, chasing each other with shouts that echoed off the ridge. Ethan watched from the porch, arms folded, a quiet pride in his chest. Clara joined him, drying her hands on her apron. They've grown so much, she said softly. He nodded. And so have you. She glanced at him. Me? He smiled. You came here scared and lost. Now look at you, stronger than any storm that's blown through these hills. Clara looked away, but her eyes shimmered. After a pause, Ethan said, You know, Clara, a ranch like this ain't much without someone to share it with. You and the boys make it feel like a home again. She turned toward him, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan, are you asking? He took her hand gently. I'm asking if you'd stay not as a guest, but as the heart of this place. Tears glistened in her eyes. I think we already are. Ethan smiled, brushing her cheek with his thumb. Somewhere behind them, Will shouted that supper was ready, and Eli laughed so hard he fell over. Ethan chuckled. Guess that settles it. Looks like my family's calling. Clara smiled through her tears. Your family, he nodded. Ours. And as the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky gold and crimson, Ethan Brooks, the rancher who once lived in silence, watched the widow and her boys run across the porch, laughter echoing through the home.